Hey everyone, I'm just feeling kind of nostalgic tonight. Thought I would share some of my thoughts tonight. In this picture here, this is a photo of the church that I went to as a child up until, oh, I don't know, I was like 16 and we moved from this area, but this church was built in 1854. It was built 106 years before I was born. Wow. But I can remember, I mean, you can see it's just a frame building. It, doesn't have no steeple or anything on it. And it doesn't even look like it has windows on it. But I can remember growing up, the community that would congregate within these walls. This particular church, when I was going there, it had they had put a veneer or wood siding on it, and I was trying to find photos of it, but I can't find anything. But I found some that were similar to it. And in this depiction, you can kind of get an idea of, this was recessed, but you can kind of see the framework, but it did not have this steeple on it. But there were all these big trees, these great big old oak trees that surrounded this little church. And of course, this marquee thing's in the way. But over here on the right, there were these long banquet tables that stayed out. I mean, they stayed out year round. And I remember the women of the church cooking, and certain holidays that we would gather. And one of them was that I can kind of really recall would have been the day, I guess it would have been Passover. We did not do communion in the church or anything, but it was that next day is when they would have this big meal, this big feast. And these tables were, I mean, these long tables, and see on the other side was the cemetery, and it had a fence, but between the church and under these big oak trees would be these big tables. And all the people of the community that went to the church, they would just, it was just such a festive occasion. And here's another it's sort of like the church that I grew up in. It had the windows on the side, and then you can kind of see the cemetery on the back, but like right over here would be where all the banquet tables would have been. But I remember when there was enough money in the funds to brick the outside, and so it was all bricked, our little church. And then a few years later, they just had to have this steeple. And so money was, collected for this steeple. So the steeple would have been more like something like this. It wasn't real big, it wasn't real fancy, but I don't know who decided that they just had to have this little steeple on this building. But if you can imagine, it's all bricked, and it has this little steeple, and you got these tables out here on the side, and it was just such a warm church, you know what I mean? But you could see things changing, like with the steeple. What's the purpose of the steeple? I don't know. Honestly, I mean, I think of it, and it reminds me of those obelisks. Is what it reminds me of. But whatever. But I remember like I say, I was baptized in a little church like this. And then shortly after, I mean, you grow up in a church, and you listen to it, and certain things, and then all of a sudden, after I was baptized, then there was this new doctrine that came in called rapture. And imagine, growing up in a little church with this whole community, not ever being taught that doctrine or the Easter doctrine either. And to have that become this sensational kind of thing. And then later, as you get older and move away, and then you move back, and you think about maybe going back to that church, because it's your roots. This, little church like this where you grew up. You still have a lot of people and friends and stuff that you grew up with, and even some of the same people going to the same church, But then you have this rapture doctrine. And you have this little rapture doctrine, and it separates you from your friends. It separates you from those that you grew up with, and it becomes a separation from going back into such a building because of the doctrine that's being taught there. And I just find it really sad that this split, this division within the Christian denominations has come about from this false doctrine. It's, you have friends and you can't even talk to them because they're so wrapped up into this rapture teaching that they can't see God's word. They can't read the word left and not realize that left behind is not there. It just says left. They don't realize who was taken in the flood. They want to be the first ones taken, and that's just, I just shake my head and pray that they read the scriptures for themselves and not listen to the doctrine behind the subject. But anyway, I just feeling kind of nostalgic, and I look at this little church, and I can just imagine those big banquet tables on the outside, and running around them, and we decorate the graves on great decoration day and stuff, and it's just sad. My aunts and uncles and all my cousins, we all went to that same little church. It's just sad that can't go back in the doors because of the false teaching, to be separated. And this is what the building looks like today. The old building caved in. They said that the brick caused it to shift its foundation or some such, and it collapsed the building. So I guess the steeple, everything got chunked. And then they added, we had, when I was a teen, we'd added a little nursery on the side, and I don't know how all this works, but anyway, they put up this metal building, and it doesn't even look the same. But all along here, in here, see the cemetery's in the back on the side here, but there were big oak trees that totally surrounded the building, and those buffet tables were right along here. But all gone, just rapture. So sad.